Hey everyone, welcome to Be the Change. My name is Lily Mott, and today's episode is about how change comes when you're ready to listen and learn. Today I'm joined by two guests, Molly Taylor and Nathaniel King, who are joining me to talk about their experiences as estranged students. Estranged Students Solidarity Week was the last week of November, and that week I talked with Millicent Wenlock about her experiences as an estranged student. Nathaniel ran a campaign that week at his university to raise awareness about estrangement, and Molly put us in touch to make this conversation happen. So with that short background, let's dive into this conversation with Molly and Nathaniel.
Hi everyone, my name's Molly. Some of you probably know me from being co-chair of the I Will movement and being part of the I Will movement with Lily, which is a huge privilege. But also I'm someone that when I started campaigning on loneliness 4 or 5 years ago, it was because I was feeling incredibly lonely at university. And the reason behind that was because I'm estranged and not many people know that about me. So yeah, I'm here in my capacity today to speak with the lovely Nathaniel, who is a student at Royal Holloway, where I used to attend. And he's doing some incredible work with students on campus around estrangement. So yeah, I'm really privileged to be in this space, and thank you, Nathaniel, for inviting us in.
I'm Nathaniel. I'm an estranged student at Royal Holloway, University of London. I'm in my final year and I've just ran a campaign for Estranged Students Solidarity Week where I shared my experiences, and I'm looking forward to share them with you today.
That's amazing. So for both of you, can you tell me a little bit about what got you started with doing this work that you do? That's a very broad question, and I kind of want to leave it intentionally broad because I'd love for you to take this however you would like, whether it's your own lived experiences that led you into this space or some work that you've been a part of previously that led you to this more specific project. But yeah, take that however you would like. Tell me a little bit about you and your journey. Let's start again with Molly, and then we can come to you, Nathaniel. If that works for you guys.
Yeah, I would say that it was definitely because of my lived experience. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people go into activism and try to create change. And usually it's because they've experienced injustice or they've seen within their community an injustice being felt. So then therefore that propels them to go and change something. And that's exactly what happened with me. But when I started off my campaigning, it wasn't specifically on estrangement like Nathaniel is tackling it, which I think is really powerful. It was actually because I felt really lonely. And whilst that was powerful in itself, and it meant that it opened up a sort of Pandora's box and made sure that people were becoming more aware on loneliness, what also happened was that then people started to box me as someone that was experiencing loneliness, but not being estranged. So they didn't see the link between both. And so I wish almost in hindsight that I went like Nathaniel and went ahead and just tried to tackle estrangement as it is. But for me, yeah, it started off with loneliness. And since then, it's sort of mobilized over years. And now I'm much more comfortable speaking about estrangement. And now a lot of people know, like, that's where my lived experience came from. And that's why I felt lonely. But I'm keen to hear about Nathaniel and why he's mobilizing on Estrangement Solidarity Week.
Right. So in a nutshell, I'm a survivor of domestic abuse, but my journey to university didn't really start until I was about maybe 16. When I say journey to university, I should probably clarify getting the reins on my life, getting control over my freedoms in my life. That didn't really happen until I was 16, but it hasn't really all come to light until now. It wasn't just a snap process. It was a very long process of trying to fight for different freedoms, such as financial freedom and the freedom to be able to move away somewhere else. So it took maybe a year or year and a half to actually secure somewhere to live. So in college, I moved somewhere else. I was in a supported accommodation, and then I ended up finishing college to the best of my ability. It was a bit shoddy because I had to claim all sorts of different support because I had nothing. I had no money. I had no safety net. I had no income. So with all that strung together, I applied to university, which I knew was going to be very daunting because the other students I knew were going in with everything prepared for them, and I had to do that all myself, or with as much support as I could get from other people. But explaining the support that I needed to people often was confusing because they didn't understand why I needed it or what I was asking for. So once I came to university, as awesome as it was to engage with my course, I found there were many gaps in the support for students that come from my background. And I feel that the university hadn't spoken to people like me. And I knew that having had the opportunity to listen to my story and to other student stories, they'd be able to hopefully create more support or change policy to make the university more accepting and more supportive. To be honest, the campaign that I did wasn't something that I thought of myself. I didn't say, right, you're not doing good enough, I want a campaign. It was more the case that I said to my students' union, you don't recognise my student group. I think that needs to change immediately. And they said, well, the best way to do that is to run a campaign. So it wasn't my plan, but I just went with it. And I actually started to like the idea as I was going through the planning process. And then that gave me even more motive to go forward and carry it out. So I believe it was a real success. So I'm really glad that I set it up. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nathaniel, for sharing your lived experience. It is really difficult. As someone that has also gone through estrangement, it's a very difficult subject, even for those that understand each other. So I think we've heard from Nathaniel's lived experience, and my experience is similar in the fact that the reason I became estranged is it's a huge sacrifice to, leave your family or leave people that you've grown up with, and usually it is because of a reason, and mine was very similar with Nathaniel as well. But I feel like estrangement and the term of it is very bureaucratic, or it has become very bureaucratic because, for example, in the eyes of student finance, when you're applying for university, you can apply under being a estranged student, but you then have to prove you're estranged, for example, and it has to be a minimum of 2 years, which I think is just totally unfair because not everyone has 2 years of estrangement, but yet have gone through incredible amounts of grief. And for example, how do you even prove that you're estranged? Like, you shouldn't have to provide documents to say that I'm no longer in contact with my parents or siblings. And so estrangement is usually seen through the eyes of not being in contact with your family or your main caregivers. But also estrangement can look so different for so many people. Like, it can be estranged from siblings. It can be estranged from your larger, family ties. It can be estranged from your whole family. It can be partial estrangement. It can come and go. You can have periods of times where you don't speak to your family for several reasons and for good reasons. But when it comes to university and the student finance, they do see it very much a black and white, a binary experience. And that's not fair, particularly as Nathaniel said, that the getting support is already so difficult and you're already going through such traumatic and a grieving experience. So yeah, estrangement basically looks so different for everyone. So we can't really assume that someone's estranged for an certain reason, and we should just hear individual lived experiences.
Molly, what barriers did you face during your childhood and then during university? And of course, you're still going through your master's, which is incredible. And then what barriers did you expect to run into in the future? Big question there and lots to cover, but as much as you would like to share.
Yeah, thank you. So I didn't become estranged until I was 21. So when we look under the umbrella of estrangement, I wasn't severely impacted by estrangement until that age. But there was obviously several barriers that I faced in childhood, because the reason I became estranged was because of quite difficult family circumstances and being a survivor of many different things. And I think here, I want to say that I'm not care experienced, and I'm really proud and grateful that I've come across so many friends of mine that have gone into the care system and found sort of hope, and they found families and places that have really supported them. But I wasn't put into care, even though I should have been. And that was a really hard experience because it's meant that I've almost been an invisible child growing up. So I was still experiencing some quite severe forms of harm, but then wasn't supported adequately by the services, and people didn't know what was really going on in my life. And also when you're a carer leaver, so you access care and then you grow up over 18 and you leave the care system, you become a care leaver and you get quite a lot of packages of like support. So for example, funding at university, funding for your first sort of independent living. You get some sort of support with driving, for example, to help you transition into more independence. So even though I wasn't care like a leaver, I've still experienced very similar barriers to those that have gone through care. And that has been quite difficult because it means that I didn't get the care leavers package that a lot of my friends have done. But when I became estranged, when I was 21, not only was I first generation student, which is already quite a lot, considering that my parents don't have any qualifications or have ever lived through university life or know what it means to be a university student, but it meant that I quite literally rocked up on the doors of a university that I'd never really researched or understood sort of the importance of going to university. And I rocked up with barely any belongings, with literally one suitcase and no family dropping me off, which in comparison to my peers at the time was just heartbreaking. And so that was one of the first barriers I experienced, was trying to actually navigate university life and student finance, for example, putting applications through, understanding what I was entitled to. I had no guarantor for my student housing, so the bare minimum savings I had literally had to fund my own university accommodation, which again, they were my life savings, and I didn't have any support there. And I remember just feeling really ostracized and really lonely, like, and whilst everyone else, you know, in Freshers Week were going out drinking or making friends, I wasn't engaging in those activities because I was holding so much grief and just trying to settle in as a bare basic, like, just experience. And because of my experiences, I don't choose to drink alcohol. So it meant that that was a whole nother barrier of trying to make friends and fit in at university. The one good thing I would say is that my university at the time did offer some funding for estrangement, and there was no sort of proving if I was estranged, as it was through student finance. It was independent of that. And so I did get some extra money throughout the year to help me with that. However, like you've mentioned, Lily, I'm now at a master's sort of level degree. And what I find really strange and really heartbreaking is at my current university now, the cap for supporting estranged students is age 25. And I'm now 25, so it means I don't actually get any support anymore, despite still being estranged, and the fact that it's probably going to be a lifelong experience. And I think that's such a shame that has, you know, you put a cap on that experience, because it's just not fair. And my studies had been severely disrupted because of loneliness. So it's meant that I'm still at university at 25 and technically a mature student, if we want to say that. Whereas if I was estranged maybe in 20 years old, then I would have got 5 years more of support. But I just don't see why that's needed as a cap. And then obviously, I think stating the obvious here is I've gone through immense grief and mental health suffering, and often it's been fluctuating. In the first few years of estrangement, I was severely traumatized and really struggled with my mental health. But as time's gone on, I'm dealing with it a lot better, and I'm starting to find my family through community, like the I Will movement, and through people at my current university. But it's taken so much strength and resilience to get here, and often without a choice, which I don't really like, but here we are, I'm here. And in terms of what I expect to feel in the future, I mean, for example, I struggle with emergency contacts. When I go on trips, for example, or when I'm engaged in youth engagement activities, I often have to put down my emergency contact, and I don't have a parental figure or trusted, safe adult for that. So often I'm having to ask my flatmate if they would like to be my emergency contact, which I think is a huge risk, because obviously they would care for me, but they don't have the same responsibility over me, and they've got their own life as well. So that's quite heavy, and that's something that I will have to keep dealing with in the future. And then again, guarantors, as you grow up and, you know, go into more independent living, aside from university, you have to keep proving that you've got an extra pot of money to support you and your finances. And I don't have that, so often having to rely on life savings. And I think also just the sociology side of it, like as people grow up and we graduate university, we have this expectation of making a family and like settling down. I personally don't think I want that because of my experiences, and that's kind of shaped my opinion. But it kind of does make me think about, if I were to settle down or I were to get into a relationship, having to explain that I'm estranged, and sort of that mismatch is really difficult, and it's something I've experienced multiple times. So that's something that's kind of impending on me, you know, as I grow up, and having to explain my story over and over again is quite hard. And I'm sure a lot of people on this who are listening to this have also experienced that.
Thank you for that, Molly. Thank you. Nathaniel, over to you. Can you please tell me about your campaign that you ran for Estranged Students Solidarity Week?
So to be honest, it was a real success. We had events on every day, and students actually approached the events hoping to gain tailored support, and they received it. Students that were estranged or care experienced, or maybe haven't been registered as those identities yet, came to the events and tried to reach support through the events that I set up. And without my campaign, they potentially would have not done that, because they wouldn't have seen themselves recognised in the university's support. And I knew that's what it needed. I knew that all it needed was just the name. Even if I didn't do anything, just saying that the community is supported by this organisation would be enough to persuade people to come and talk to support services, and to try and get so much more out of the university experience, which unfortunately was not what I received. But I want to give that to people who are in my shoes now, so that they can go forward and feel more confident about their studies, really. We had a community event, and I got to meet some new students, which was nice, because I don't know all the 12,000 plus students on this campus. Especially, I don't know the ones that are estranged or care experienced. So it was nice to meet more people who were willing to introduce themselves and talk with me. And then I also ran a game show on Friday to, I guess, just try and fundraise, but not fundraise for money, fundraise for interest. So in running the game show, I was able to offer insight into the experiences of estranged students. And in return, the students and staff that attended got a 2-hour session of games and running around a department building and winning prizes. Everyone had so much fun. So I'm really glad that I put in a bit more planning for this event, because a lot of the events on campus that we do are small scale and quite straightforward. And I decided to invest a bit of time and a bit of incentive into this event, and it paid off, because people came, and a lot more people came than I thought would. And I was able to sort of kickstart those positive conversations about estranged students and care experienced students.
Thank you so much for that, Nathaniel. So now, to close out our episode, I have one more question for both of you. Lots of young people want to make change, but they might not know how to get started with that work. What advice do you want to share with those people who might be listening?
Yeah, well, I would say that I always bring it back to that your lived experience is a superpower. So I don't think you have to explain to anyone why you want to go and change something, because if it's rooted in your lived experience, which I'm sure it is, because that's why people go and create change, it's not for any random reason, then that's all that matters. And so even the smallest mobilization, whether it be like me at university 4 years ago, creating postcards, which students could colour in and sort of express emotions around loneliness, that was a really small activity that I offered students on my campus. And that's kind of what started the conversation around loneliness. Or it could be literally running a solidarity campaign like Nathaniel's doing. And as he's explained, this is something that he kind of fell into. He didn't have the ambition of creating a campaign, and often we don't. It's just that you feel like there's something going on that needs to be changed. And I think that's so powerful. So I would just say, believe in your story and your lived experience. And even if it's a really small act of resistance, at least you're resisting, and that's so powerful. And then again, as part of the bigger picture, you're resisting with others, and that just shows the power of collective action. And that's really how long-term systemic change happens, is when you're doing it with other people. So just don't feel that it's all on your shoulders. And I've definitely felt that way. I know, Lily, you've probably felt that way, and I'm sure Nathaniel has. But when you come together as a community, it's way more powerful, and change can be mobilised quicker and more substantially over time. So, yeah.
So the experience of actually carrying out the campaign is an incentive in itself. I didn't realise how many different opportunities I would gain from running the campaign. So it's a learning experience as well. You're also investing in yourself, even though you're investing in the initiative, in the idea, in the aim in the objective that you want to achieve. You're also investing in you. So that's a really good reason to go and do it, and hopefully should be some encouragement, even if you're nervous to do it, that the risk is worth the reward. So in terms of actually getting started to set up a campaign, there are a lot of organizations around, and I'll liken it to what we're doing right now. Lily, I've never met you before, which has been quite daunting for me because obviously I've talked about so many personal situations and experiences with you, and yet I barely know you at all. And I can imagine for everyone at home, that's probably quite daunting as well. That's a very mature thing to go and do, to go and speak to people that you don't know or organizations you've never met. I can tell you that there are so many friendly people, or friends as such, that work for charitable organizations that you can seek, because whatever you want to do, there is probably an organization that already exists for it. And if there isn't, they'll be campaigning for something similar. And if you're not ready to get started on a campaign, there are plenty of people that are willing to give up their time to essentially talk with you and give you some insight and encouragement to set up your own campaign, and they'll hopefully also give you some resources so you don't have to actually reinvent the wheel. You can actually use those templates to help you. So a lot of the hard work is already done for you. So even if you don't know if you want to do it, even if you go and talk to people and you think, no, this is not for me, it is worth having those conversations, definitely. And it should hopefully also give you some more confidence, because it may answer questions you didn't know that you had.
I really enjoy talking with Molly and Nathaniel, and I think it's incredible that they are talking about their experiences and raising awareness about estrangement. There is so much to learn from other people's lived experience if you're willing to listen. So thank you so much for listening to this conversation with Molly and Nathaniel. Please keep in mind that change comes when you're ready to listen and learn. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and you can find Molly and Nathaniel on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I included those links in the description of this episode. If you want to talk about anything I mentioned, please reach out to me by email at lily@bethechangepodcast.org or on Instagram at Be The Change Media Network. I am working on expanding Be The Change Media Network, which means bringing you more inspiring stories from amazing guests. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could leave the podcast a rating and a comment, because it will help these stories to reach, educate, and inspire more people. And I would also love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Tune in for my next episode, but until then, be the change you wish to see in the world. Bye, guys.